Great. And so want to welcome from SFUSD's Facilities Department, Karen Sullivan, who's going to speak with us about the master plan for facilities.
Hi. Thank you all for making time in the meeting. I am excited to be here and also excited to share the progress that we've been making on the facilities master plan and to hear from you any questions that you have, comments, thoughts, feedback you have on the priorities that we're proposing for the facilities master plan, which will be the facility department's 10-year work plan. Thanks, Melissa. Okay, so to get started, and if questions come up, I will try to monitor the chat, but feel free to pop questions into the chat as I'm going if there's any questions that you have. Otherwise, at the end, there'll be time for us to talk about any questions that come up. So the process of developing the facilities master plan is really grounded in the district's vision, values, goals, and guardrails. We started this process by having a team of assessors go to each school site to evaluate the systems within the building using a consistent methodology so that we could be both transparent and data-driven about the way that we allocate our resources for capital projects. Since getting that and gathering that information and beginning work on the master plan, we've also been conducting community outreach to make sure that the priorities included within the plan are responsive to the priorities of our school community. And of course, at the center of everything that we do is a goal of trying to create student-centered spaces that serve the whole child. Okay, thanks, Melissa. Can go to the next one. So where we are, as I mentioned, this process started with facilities condition assessments that were completed in October of 2022. That the results of those assessments were presented to the Board of Education. Since then, we've been using that data along with feedback and analysis that we've gathered from school community, teachers, parents, and other stakeholders to develop the facilities master plan. A draft of that plan was presented to the Board of Education in March of 2023. Since then, we've been incorporating feedback from both the Board of Education and our school communities, and we plan to bring a final version of the plan to the Board of Education in early May for adoption and approval. Once the plan has been approved, the next steps are to take the priorities included in the plan and use them to develop projects and programs that would be included in a future bond. Currently, we're hoping that bond would be slated for sometime in 2024, either March or November. Okay, next slide. So, on this slide, we have an overview of what we've heard are some of the key components to creating learning environments that are supportive to our students. And so things on this list include comfortable classrooms, environments, air quality, outdoor spaces, safety. And I think, right now in taking a look at this slide, if there's anything that you think is missing, feel free to either just say, add anything that you might think is missing or add it to the chat. We're always interested to hear if there's something that we aren't including that we should be thinking about. So if there's anything that you can think of, please let me know now or later. Okay. So to get started, I'm going to give a brief overview of the process of completing the facility condition assessments. Go to the next slide. So as I mentioned, for the assessments, there was a team of consultants who went to each school site. In general, it was an architect and an engineer. And those consultants would look at systems within a building. So within a given room, they would take a look at the floor or the windows or the ceiling and determine what the current condition of that system was, at what point that system would need to be replaced, and what the cost of replacement would be when the system needed to be replaced. And so one of the main metrics that we ended up getting from these assessments is what's called the Facility Condition Index. And what that does is it takes, for a given school site, all of the value of all replacements needed over the next 5-year period, and it divides it by the total value of the building. And so if you have a building that was recently modernized, there would theoretically not be very many repairs needed within the next 5-year period. And so the numerator would be low relative to the denominator, and the overall score, or FCI, would be likely in the good or excellent category, which are less than 20%. For sites that may have more replacement needs within the next 5-year period, you would expect to see a higher FCI, greater than 20%, in either the fair or poor category. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And so on this slide, you can see this is the FCI scores for all school sites throughout the district. And looking at this slide, what you can probably see is that a little bit over 50% of our sites are in either the poor or fair categories. Something we were happy to see when we looked at this data was that we don't have any school campuses that are in the deficient category. Another thing about this data that you can't see in the graph is that the majority of replacements that were noted as being needed within the next 5-year period are overwhelmingly related to life cycle. And so it is old boilers, older windows that need to be replaced, nothing related, not life safety issues, but life cycle issues. So systems that have just been used well past the end of their useful life. Okay, next slide. And when you take that information and you spread it out over the city, this is what it looks like geographically. Something that we were happy to see when we mapped this data is that the schools in the good and excellent categories are fairly evenly distributed across the city. What we did not want to see was a clustering of green within a certain neighborhood, which would have indicated that our investments had been targeted in a particular region. And so we were happy to see this distribution throughout the city. You can see on this map that there are some properties in the deficient category. So that's an Facility Condition Index of more than 60%. Those properties are predominantly our administrative buildings. So that is another takeaway, that there are clearly some investment needs in our buildings that are being used for non-educational purposes. Thanks. We can move.
Quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Is there a high amount of leased buildings that the district is keeping?
We do. I wouldn't say it's a high amount. I could probably tell you the number. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but we do have properties. Yes, we do have properties that are leased to entities and not used as school sites. Okay.
The only reason was I would imagine that those repairs or facilities would be incumbent upon the owners of those buildings. I would imagine.
Oftentimes, yeah. It depends on how the lease is structured, but yes. Oftentimes it is on the owner, who would be the district. Oh, sorry. And for leasing, it's properties that the district is leasing, not properties that the district leases from another owner.
So we lease them to other people.
Correct. Yeah. Okay, and so in addition to looking at a score by site, we can also look at the Facility Condition Index by system. And so these are some of the systems that we can categorize, that we used, that we can categorize our FCI by. And if you go to the next slide, you can see the cost estimates related to these systems. And so when we look across the portfolio, predominantly the majority of expenses from a systems perspective are related to electrical and HVAC, which is heating and ventilation. This generally does not come as a surprise when we share this information with school sites. Heating and ventilation, most of our sites rely on passive ventilation, so operable windows for ventilation. And so that category really predominantly includes things like boilers that are in need of replacement. And so with the costs that we received, the purpose of this slide is to put the cost estimates that we received into perspective. And so for a given elementary school site, this is an example of the cost estimates that we received. So looking on a 5-year time horizon, the cost to make all replacements needed over a 5-year period could be $26 million for this elementary school. If we were to replace everything at the school site and make everything new, that would cost $52 million. But the data that we received from the assessments is based on a like-for-like replacement. And so it doesn't include any upgrades. And so fluorescent light, if there is existing fluorescent lighting, this assumes that fluorescent lighting is replaced. The floors are not upgraded, windows are not changed. And also there's no reconfiguration of spaces to allow for new types of modern learning environments and teaching methods. And so when you add on that modernization factor, changing schools to really build the schools that we want for our students, you're looking at more of an estimate much closer to 115 million. And so with these estimates that we received, it is a helpful way to see where replacements of systems are needed, but the cost estimates really need to be taken into context because it's not doing an upgrade. For instance, a gas boiler is being replaced with a gas boiler. There's no upgrade to a new, more modern technology. Okay, next slide. And on this slide, this is an example of the multipurpose room at Garfield Elementary that we like to show just to highlight the impact of a modernization project. Had we done a like-for-like replacement in the multipurpose room, you can see that it would have had the same dated fixtures, not too much light. And with a modernization, we were really able to transform the room, give it a much more open floor plan, have more interaction between indoors and outdoors, more lighting, make it a much more enjoyable and collaborative space for students and teachers to be able to work in. Okay, next slide. Okay, so once the assessments were complete, our next step was working on the master plan. And you can go to the next slide. And so the master plan is, as I mentioned, the facility department's 10-year work plan. The components of the plan include the existing condition of our buildings. So that's the data we received from the condition assessments, an analysis of enrollment and capacity trends, and then a summary of emerging priorities that will be prioritized over the next 10-year period. And one of the reasons that we do the plan is it allows us to be strategic about our decisions, but it's also a requirement for that we have this in place in order to receive state matching funds. Okay, next slide. And so within the plan, we have identified, within the draft plan that we presented in March, we had 12 priorities. Based on feedback we've received from the community, we have now increased that to 13. Those priorities are grouped into categories of health and safety, what we're calling learning environments, and then policy directives. For each priority, we have a set of recommendations about the next steps and deliverables, as well as the pacing, which indicates how quickly we want to move forward with achieving our proposed deliverables. And the pacing options are highlighted on this slide. Okay, we can go to the next slide. And so now I'm going to do a quick overview of what our priorities are, and then I will open it up for any questions that you all may have. Within the health and safety category, we have 4 priorities identified around site security, air quality, seismic readiness, and water quality. For most of these priorities, the pacing is steady. And so that means these are things that we know we are going to have to be consistently paying attention to and making investments in over the next 10-year period. Site security is something that we have chosen to accelerate. And so most recently, a portion of funds from the 2016 bond were reallocated to make investments into site security. With that funding, our goal is to have installed security locks at all of our school sites by 2024. And then with any funds that are left over, we're planning to make investments into PA systems so that our sites have comprehensive PA system coverage. We know that all of our sites have some sort of PA system, but we want to make sure that the coverage is comprehensive. So not just a phone in a classroom, but so that multi-purpose rooms and hallway areas still get that PA system coverage. With the funding that we have now, we know that we cannot make all the investments we want to make into PA systems. And after PA systems, we are also interested in making improvements in remote door access, as well as security cameras. And so to make all of the investments that we would need to make in order for each site to have all of these security components would require additional funding from what we've currently allocated. Okay, next slide. In learning environments, investment or priorities that we have for our school sites are outdoor spaces, dining area, investments in dining areas, technology, and then our modernization program. Again, for most of these priorities, we know that these are investments that we will be classifying as a pacing of steady. So we will continue to make these investments across our school sites over the next 10-year period. Based on demand that we have seen for investments into outdoor spaces, we have chosen to accelerate that priority. There is a portion of the 2016 bond proceeds that were also allocated to make grants at school sites for investments in their outdoor spaces, and we received overwhelming demand for that program. More than 50% of sites applied. And so based on that demand, we have chosen to accelerate this priority, and as future funding is available, we will prioritize those spaces. One priority that isn't included on this list, but will be included in the final draft of the plan, is something that we're calling core functionality. And what that really speaks to is the core building systems that need to be working across all of our school sites. So things like plumbing, heating, electricity. What we've heard as we've been talking to school communities is that these are the systems that, while a modernization can be transformative, these are the systems that there is a baseline expectation that they should be functioning on a consistent and reliable basis. And so we want to make sure that we can address those needs as well. And so that will be added to this list with a pacing of steady, knowing that we need to continue to make investments into these systems. Okay, next slide. And then the last category is policy directives. And these are policies that are on the horizon that we know will have an impact on our real estate. And so universal TK is a state mandate that we will need to have a space for any child who is 4 years old by the 2025-2026 school year. We have started creating more TK classrooms at our school sites, but I'm sure, as you all know, it is not that easy to find a vacant classroom to be used for a new purpose. And so we know moving forward that it is going to be harder to create these spaces and investments will be needed. Oh, do you want to go ahead? I see a hand raised. Sorry. Oh, but you're muted.
During all the upgrades and renovations, to what extent are you all considering climate change? Because a lot of schools need air conditioning now,
Yeah,
or some type of more active, and I think that's an emerging priority for sure.
absolutely. And that falls under the first category of health and safety. We have a priority of air quality. And that priority is that whenever we are going to do an investment, we will do an analysis of the ventilation interventions that will optimize air quality for that particular site.
Oh, okay. So you're connecting it to air quality. That's very smart.
Yeah, we did a study, and it's, there's a lot of different factors that can influence ventilation at a site, orientation, the density of the buildings surrounding the site. And so there isn't really like a cookie cutter solution. And so when we do a project, we will be assessing the ventilation options to make sure that we are optimizing air quality at that site. Okay, student assignment is something. Oh, Terry, yeah, go ahead.
I see the zone-based. What I was looking for was, in this master plan, was some mention of whether we need all the schools we need, and if we don't, or do we have a plan for consolidating and closing and repurposing sites?
Right. And that is not, yes, we do not include that in the plan. What we do say around the zone-based student assignment policy is that we know that when the zones are finalized, that there will be an impact on school sites, but until the zones are finalized, we don't know what that will look like. And so that's why we've given a defer pacing to this category, because we really don't have enough information at this point to say what that would look like. But as more information is available, this would be updated to reflect the new information that we have and the impact that that would have on our real estate.
That's sort of, I mean, we're spending a lot of money on buildings that we don't need, and we have a real budget problem. So it seems like deferring this aspect of the master plan is not well advised.
Okay, thanks for the feedback. Yeah, I'll make a note of that. Thanks. Okay. Also within this category, we have portfolio management. This really speaks to our buildings that are used for non-educational purposes, and completing an analysis of what their current utilization is and the opportunities for optimizing the utilization of these properties, with two specific opportunities that are coming up on the horizon around campuses at Leola, Havard, and Treasure Island. And then affordable housing for educators. The Board of Education passed a resolution with the goal of creating 550 units of affordable housing for educators by 2030. We have made some progress towards this goal with the groundbreaking at Shirley Chisholm Village that will generate 134 units of affordable rental housing for educators. But we know that we have quite a ways to go to get to the goal of 550 units. And so the pacing of Accelerate here is related to the pursuit of other opportunities to create affordable housing for educators, which could include a variety of different opportunities that we want to continue researching. Okay, and next slide. So where do we go from here? We are still in the process of collecting feedback from the community, and we really take all the feedback that we receive very seriously. And we're hoping to hear from as many members of the school community as possible. Parents, teachers, staff, and students are encouraged to take a virtual workshop. We've included links here in the presentation and would love it if you could share them with your school communities. We will be presenting a final draft of the plan, as I mentioned, to the Board of Education in early May, but we will continue doing outreach at school sites through the end of the school year. And so if there's any schools that you know of who would be interested, please feel free to reach out to Jeanette Chang, whose contact information is included in this presentation. We have both a virtual format that's interactive. It's translated into 3 languages. Participants can provide feedback in that format, but if an in-person format is easier, we are also available to go to school sites and provide presentations in that way as well. So whatever is easier, we can be available. And with that, I will stop talking and open it up to any other questions that people may have. Thanks for listening.
Thank you so much, Karen, and thank you for your time and for offering that accessibility and availability to the school sites to schedule meetings with them as well. That's much appreciated. Does anyone have any questions? I'm going to check the chat here. And we will be sharing the presentation as well as we're recording, and so we can upload the video to our YouTube channel, and we'll send this out via our newsletter as well.
Thanks so much.
Can you just clarify
go ahead. Janet, go ahead.
Oh, I just saw the thing about something about Treasure Island. What's happening out there?
Oh yeah, so at Treasure Island, we currently lease a property from the Treasure Island Development Authority, and we have an opportunity to potentially take title to that property and convert it into a school site. There is a defined point at which we would need to make that decision. And so that's why that is included as a priority, that we will need to decide whether or not we want to take advantage of that opportunity. Currently, the space is not used for educational purposes. It's leased to community organizations.
Can I just say thank you for such a clear presentation of a lot of information, so thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was really good. Thanks.
Oh, thank you.
Michelle looks forward to sharing it with everyone.
Are we
Yeah,
still
thanks for
recording? We
listening.
could probably end recording.